Well, hello there, everyone. Here, show you right here is like for a real long story, and this basically talks about right here is like for you have right here is the childhood photo right here is I went ahead and worked right here on Photoshop, and thinking about is to where having the illustration program right here, but I'll go ahead and use right here is see the pencil tool, but anyway you have right here is that with one of my original photos that whenever I was about 2 or 3 years old. I think it was taken back in 1986, and you have right here is my name right here. But you see right here is like for the real long story, and anybody that may want to where that what is a long story necessarily? It's basically a story to where that yeah it takes place maybe a few years ago to about maybe 10 or 20 years ago, something like that. Hard to explain. Anybody who asks later on about what happened during that time, but still that really long story that anybody that may ask questions, and then it seems like to where that really hard for them to understand or anything like that. But what you have right here is based on my education, you have right here is I went ahead and this was right here was one of my pictures right here, my original my original look, and then knowing about I'm like yeah, for me being a student and wanted to where really is that a real long story to why that you decided to wait 10 years before you went back to school, and as well as for what you're capable of doing, and then for any issues that you may try to work out stuff like that, but situations like that. But on the other hand, that this picture right here is that yeah, I don't know if I would call this like show and tell or anything like that, but this right here would be in about before I even started kindergarten. That I know this picture was taken I think around spring or summertime, 1986, something like that. But on the other hand, that with the real long story that I have right here is like and I know that the schools that they would ask me to write about maybe 2 or 3 paragraphs about what we think what a long story basically means. And it's like for what is considered a long story, a story that can take place years ago or before something at some point of time that took place, something that happened, something that was discovered for the reasons, that can or cannot be explained or understood, whether sometimes based on the story about a childhood growing up and realizing that, for what they are and, what they have, passion to do, as far as their careers and their ability to speak. Most of the childhood, I wonder, if I, could do a number of things, that I do nowadays. One of those is for higher education. So I know that if we were to look it up in a dictionary or anything like that about whenever people usually say for a long story, and you're like Warren to where that any situations that happened from 3 or 4 years ago, or maybe about another story that came up to where that you meet somebody in class or something like that. And I know I keep thinking about is to where that anybody that I maybe went to school with those years ago, and you're like Warren to where that they may find they may meet you again, meet up with you again on maybe on a social media site or something like that, and that they tell you about yeah, that if you remember me, yeah, we were in class together or something. So I know a few of those classmates that we may wonder about if we're going to be meeting up with them maybe on Facebook or something like that. But you're like Warren to where that maybe is it really a long story for how you met somebody, about how you meet them, and then for how that they know you and your work very well. So we were toward it anything that you were working on, and some that may ask, I'm like, these could be doctors or counselors that they may ask about you. What happened between you and this other person? I'm like the group or anything like that, about anything that you met them maybe at a group, or maybe if it was at the doctor's, or maybe you went to school with this person, and now they kind of want to know a little bit more about how's it been going on. So you're like Warren to where that these stories, so that it's like they took place maybe about 12 or 15 years ago, but then that knowing about, yep, for whatever we feel comfortable talking about. So whenever I do my artwork here, I'm like, really, do I kind of consider this kind of a long story? Because on your hand, too, this is supposed to be like, about the future right here, but on your hand, this right here is, painting I went and worked right here, and this right here is a photo that it was taken. Yeah, but on your hand, that was taken from those years ago. But when I was very young, but I wonder to where is it really a long story to where that use with my right hand and left hand is to where you see right here is that yeah, it looked like I was pinching myself. I looked like I was pinching myself, and then this right here looked like I was trying to keep my balance. So we're like Warren to where that we had those habits, but is there a real long story for what we see in this picture right here? So, like Warren, to where that were you looking at the camera while you had those curls, and then on your hand too? That yeah, that anything that you were doing, whenever you were young, that you want to speak through a microphone or anything like that. You did not want to write a paper as much, but then you went and wrote this in your journal. That maybe you had a maybe you had what you call a secret love. You had what you call a crush on a girl or something like that, or maybe if it was anything else that where it was kind of say kept confidential or anything like that. But let's just say on average to where that with my name right here is that I kept thinking about is to where that one of those things could be a long story too, is to where that yeah, that back whenever I was in the first grade, if I can remember right, that I had problems trying to I had to look up my name just to be able to write it down, and I was like yeah, that I think a few times the teachers told me that that I had that issue as to where that my name was written on the desk, but then I had to look at my last name a few times. So I think if I can remember right, I put it, I spelled it as, MG, MGUIRE or something like that. But anyway, I would not spell my name correctly sometimes, and then maybe once or twice I would put the wrong date or put the wrong assignment down or anything like that. But I like wanted to where that yeah, that that was back then. That was back in early 1991. Maybe about 1989 around that time. So whenever I think about this, is to where maybe my education now compared to where it was back then. Anything that maybe about counseling or maybe medications or anything like that. But on the other hand, medications that I was on or that I was taking, and as well as for insurance, stuff like that. So how do we explain about for a real long story? And or some that may say that yeah, well that's something that's confidential, but on the other hand, that yeah, there are some things about the story to where that I do feel a little bit comfortable talk about them, but then on the other hand, that like Warren to where that sometimes it's like, well, somebody who asks, really, really, I'm like, well, well, why, what's why do you need to know? Why are you that curious? So the way I think about it, though, is like really, like anybody who may find when my work one of these days maybe on a social media site, and then they may wonder to where that, hey, was that you that painted this, and what does that mean? So anybody that say the long story could mean is to where that after you post something, after you work something maybe on on Facebook or something, and after about maybe 5 months later, and then somebody's going to want to ask about it. So you're like Warren to where, okay, you picked now to ask about it, huh? Like that was years ago, or that was months ago. So we were to where that anything that we say or do, and then after about maybe 20 weeks later, or maybe after 7 months later, and then somebody's going to maybe be curious and want to know information about it, And like say, that was a long story, but one of those long stories could be is to where maybe you were mad about something, or maybe you wanted to talk about something, something that you cannot get off your mind. So you decide to go ahead and write in a journal, a few sentences about something that you want to be a part, you want to be a part of the group or something like that. You wrote about one of your about something about you were talking to somebody maybe at work or in class or something about something, and then you were afraid that they were not going to like it, whichever it was, or if it was about you want to be a part of the group, but it seems like that people keep picking on you. They don't like your work. So it's like Warren to where that anybody that may say that if you find somebody else's work, it just seems like to where that yeah, it's kind of a long story to really how to explain it all, because there's a lot of things that maybe that you just cannot explain about somebody's career and somebody's education as well, especially my own education, to where could I maybe explain to where that with my artwork as to where it started from paper and then now it's being developed on like programs like Illustration and then designing programs and stuff like that. So even mobile phones, I'm like think about it to where how does it go from analog to what you call these little touchscreen buttons? So anybody that may want to where that really that anything that's really what you call a real long story, something that you may have learned on your own, again, more likely is considered a long story too. So whenever we think about it, to where how do we tell our family and friends about something that's what you call a real long story? And does that mean that something that you would never understand, that person would never understand, or does that mean as to where you don't want to talk about, none of your business, whichever it is? But the way I think about it, though, is like really that if they want an answer within 5 minutes, you might just have to tell them it's a real long story. But then if they sometimes it somebody that like a doctor, specialist, or counselor that may ask, it's like it is to sit down with that person and talk to them for about 30 minutes about a little bit about some details and warrant to where that yeah, well, it's if it was due to an accident or anything like that, but still that and I'm sure anybody probably say that yeah, something like an incident that may have happened, and like warrant to where that honest mistake or something like that. Yep, that's a real long story too, because you were maybe just testing something and then all of a sudden something happened to where maybe it shouldn't have happened. So whenever we write about it, and sometimes, really, is it better to write about something before you actually do it? I guess that seems like that's another question too. That with me though, that if I was pinching myself in the leg, or maybe just looking at the camera or anything like that, watching TV, and I'm like Warren, to where is it maybe better? I usually think about it to where what I think is that I think to my mind about what I want to say before I actually say it, or is it better to write it out before you actually say it, or if you just don't have enough time, that sometimes you just want to pause for about maybe 5 or 10 seconds or so for maybe a full minute and just think about something before you actually say it. And one of those will be is to where that yeah, that a story to where that which you would like to talk about. This is how you want to go ahead and try to say it. And sometimes anybody say that anything that you do want to say, it's not always easy to try to say it. You're trying to read off from what you remember from what the notes said, and then actually making a speech, and sometimes that's pretty hard to do. So anybody say that really the real long story goes by is to where you're trying to talk about something, and sometimes it's hard to talk about whenever that it's hard to remember all that stuff too. And I'm sure anybody probably say that that whenever you got a lot of stuff on your mind and trying to remember all kinds of things, and you're like Warren, to where really that is to know is like for the most of the childhood is like to have known about for those for one of those long stories could be like for higher education. So anything that we may want to speak about is about for who we are and what we learned, and as well as for what we studied as well, and knowing about growing up, thinking about it, to where you look at these pictures and you're like Warren, to where People may think about it. That's a cute picture of you. That's a real cute picture of you, Matthew. Like, but then on your hand, whenever they look at this writing here, and you're like, Warren Tour, can you explain, why is it that you had so much complications reading and writing, solving math problems, learning, reading books, that type of stuff. Meeting other people. So you're like Warren to word it. To make the long story short, it just seems like to word it. It seems like people just got to get used to me first. They got to get used to what I do first before I can go ahead and start getting comfortable and getting used to them. So it seems like it's all about getting connected first, getting introduced first before you go to those next steps. So that's really the way I think about it. And there may be other reasons too, but on your hand, too, Todd, for the real long story, thanks for watching, man. May 25.